Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Trevor Brown. I'm from Juniper Systems, and good morning to you wherever you are, or good afternoon, depending where you're calling in from. Today, thank you for joining today's webinar. Today, we're going to talk about SnowGage, our snow depth management system that we're quite excited about, and we're quite excited for the season to begin. Okay, and bear with me. Okay, again, my name is Trevor Brown. I'm the Natural Resources Market Manager here at Juniper Systems. We're also joined by Jared Campbell. He's an engineer at Campbell Scientific, which is our parent company. And we're also joined by Caitlin Heiner from our marketing department here at Juniper Systems. Okay, here's the agenda for today. So I know we have a full hour scheduled, but likely we'll be done a lot earlier. The system is that simple. The agenda that we're going to cover are first a brief introduction of Juniper Systems and Campbell Scientific. We're then going to talk about SnowGage and just give a system overview. We're also going to spend the primary majority of the time with an actual demonstration of SnowGage, both inside the Snowcat and in the office. We're going to talk about alternative approaches for snow depth measurements in automated fashion at a ski resort. And we're going to talk about purchase options for SnowGage and then ultimately leave some time for questions. If for some reason you have some questions, go ahead and feel free to enter them into the GoToMeeting chat dialog box there. That way, if for some reason we're not able to get to those questions, we'll be able to respond and follow up with you individually to answer your questions. We're also recording this webinar, so if you want to see this at a later time, we'll make it available so that you can share it with other people or have a look at it again. Okay, first part of the agenda, a company introduction for Juniper Systems and Campbell Scientific. So we are a field data collection company based in Logan, Utah, which is if you know Logan, it's in the far northern part of Utah on the backside of the Wasatch, about an hour and a half north of Salt Lake, near the Idaho, not too far from the Wyoming borders as well. Campbell Scientific is our parent company. They are a world leader in making data loggers, as well as a number of sensors that attach to those data loggers used in a wide range of applications. Juniper Systems focuses more on mobile field data collection. Our primary product line involves ruggedized field data collectors that are used in a number of industries such as agriculture, natural resources, land survey, a lot of other field data collection applications, but we also have on-combine applications in agriculture, as well as the SnowGage product that attaches directly to snowcats. All right, so for now we're going to talk about a SnowGage system overview. Bear with me here. Okay, so first, inside the Snowcat. So this is definitely something we're really excited about. What we're able to do is we have a snow depth sensor. It mounts, it's about the size of a shoebox, and we'll show some pictures of that in a little bit. But what it does, it mounts directly underneath your Snowcat, and it is sheltered there. And it's connected to GPS. It can be installed in multiple Snowcats across the entire ski resort. And inside of the Snowcat, there's a tablet computer. Here's a kind of brief view of what that looks like inside of the Snowcat. We'll go into details about exactly, what each of these different settings do. But ultimately, there's a map. It's going along. It's taking real-time measurements of the snow depth below the Snowcat and showing the snow depth, as you see here, displayed in inches, and also just showing a map of where the Snowcat is currently on the ski resort. You can also look at previous days' snow depths as mapped by that Snowcat. And again, we'll go into some detailed images and views of how that works in just a moment. So one or many Snowcats can be out mapping and looking at snow depths at a time. Ultimately, the data is sent automatically to the office. Inside of the office, someone can log in to a secure website and look at all the different snow depths. And how it's displayed is, as you can see here, at the very top of the screen here, there's a user-defined depth chart. And so, for example, we'll look at this in more detail, but in the red areas that you see on the resort here, those are the very low spots. In the dark blue areas, probably where there's some snowmaking canyons, you can see that the snow is a lot deeper. And so it just gives you this nice simplified view of the snow depths on the various parts of your mountain so that you can understand what areas might need attention in making your grooming decisions and snowmaking decisions. So that's kind of a brief overview of how the system works. Now we're going to jump into a little more details. Okay, let's start with a demonstration inside of the Snowcat, and first we'll talk about kind of some of what it looks like in there. So inside the Snowcat, ultimately there's a tablet that's just mounted inside of the Snowcat that the operator has visibility. And there are a number of different tablet options. So this is one tablet option, but depending on your preference, there's different styles of mounts that can go inside the Snowcat there. As you see, the operator can kind of zoom in on the map and see how, look at different areas of the resort and see how deep the snow is in those different areas. But the kind of key part is that they can also see the real-time snow depth below them. So really, the idea is that by having that real-time snow depth below the Snowcat, you can save time spent manually probing the snow and getting out and seeing how deep that snow is under the cat. And really, you can prioritize where grooming is needed most. So you can look at the snow depths from the previous days. Wherever the cat has been on previous days, it will show the color map like you see of how deep that snow is. And the Snowcat position is shown on the map, allowing the operator to navigate to those shallow spots. And really the key part is the operator can move snow from high places to low places. The data is sent automatically via cell, Wi-Fi, or manually transferred. And it's really easy to use. So that is kind of the key underlying theme of this system, is that we wanted to make this extremely simple to use. How it works is when the operator turns on the Snowcat, everything just starts working. They don't have to go in and start the application or do other things. The GPS starts working, the sensor starts working. It is all connected. They just turn on the Snowcat and everything works. So there is easy operator training. We know that people are focused on grooming. We didn't want to have them introduce some complicated technology. And so this has really been one of our key goals in making sure that everything is easily trained and easy to use. So one of the benefits is that it can be installed to most any type of Snowcat. So we have successfully installed across most of the major models for piston bully, pre-Noth, for example. And one of the key things is that this system, it's easily transferred between different Snowcats. So if you retire a Snowcat, or if you sell it, or if you're leasing a Snowcat, it's something that you can install to the Snowcat and then just remove or transfer to a different Snowcat when you're done. It's a relatively easy process to do that. So just to kind of give you a little bit of idea of the sensor technology and the Snowcat hardware. So within that, within the sensor itself is actually an ultra wideband radar sensor. So as I mentioned, it's about the size of a shoebox that you can see there, and it's mounted up inside of the Snowcat. Now it is protected from, everything is set up in a way, and it's successfully ran it for multiple seasons now at various resorts. We know it's a pretty harsh environment. A lot of snow gets stuck up in there and gets ice and things of that nature, but we have mounted it in such a way that to accommodate for that rugged environment. And we've been pretty successful in that area. So it's an ultra wideband radar technology. We do have mounted on top of the Snowcat is a precision GPS. This is one that we use regularly in our agriculture applications, and it's a real-time sub-meter accuracy GPS. So the typical accuracy is about 2 feet or so, right in that range, depending on the environment where you're driving. And, as I mentioned earlier, you have the tablet computer inside. So there is some various little mounting hardware and cables that are also associated. But this is the key components, hardware components anyway, that's related to the SnowGage. Okay, before we jump into a brief demonstration, I wanted to talk about accuracy and testing. So this is something as a scientific-based company, we're really concerned with making sure that our product is as accurate as possible. And this has really been one of the primary focuses of our SnowGage product, is that we wanted to make sure and focus on becoming experts in snow depth accuracy, particularly as it relates to ski resorts. So what we've seen and what we've been able to accomplish is plus or minus about 5 inches at a 95% confidence level based on some pretty rigorous tests that we've held ourselves accountable to. And I wrote here in standard conditions because there are some exceptions to this that I'm going to describe in a moment. But this is an example test that we had, and what we do is we go and we run snowcats, and then we, with the sensor attached, and then we have been probing with right along behind into the same exact spots, and then we're able to compare that data and statistically, analyze whether, the accuracy of this, and what we saw was about a plus or minus 5 inches accuracy. What you see in this chart here is that the Snowcat average depth on the sensor is in blue. In the red is the manually probed results. So this is, we consider this to be the real result, even though there are some variation in, in users and how they probe, for example. But this is the actual depth of the snow, and in the blue is what the sensor was reading. And so what you'll notice is there's a little slight bit of a lag in some of the areas here. For example, you see this big dip in the depth, in the actual depth, and in the blue, you see the sensor actually kind of averaged that out just a little bit. So we did that because we found that really to be the best result in making sure, for example, if there were some outliers, that we wanted to kind of remove those data to reflect the, as closely as possible what we could average depth. So you see there a pretty nice pattern following the actual snow depth and the real snow depths. So, we also wanted to not oversell this technology. We wanted to be upfront and talk about known limitations and just make sure to set expectations for users. One of the biggest limitations of this technology, and what we found in our multiple years of testing and use by our customers, is that during spring meltdown, it's the sensor technology. If you have a very high water content in the snow, if it's literally melting during that springtime in the day, for example, the accuracy is impacted from liquid water. So what we found is the biggest value of our customers so far, is in the feedback that we've had, is really that it's most useful to assist in achieving and kind of maintaining that early and mid-season coverage goals. So during those times when you're making a lot of snow, to have to get that, establish that base, and then as you're preparing for the holidays, for example, when a lot of resorts are very busy, it's been very useful during those times. Also during mid-season, when you're just trying to maintain those bases and understand where you need to maybe do a little spot snowmaking, for example, that's certainly where it's been most useful. Now, kind of, a silver lining in this spring meltdown condition is what we've found is that multiple resorts, customers continue to use SnowGage, maybe not necessarily for the snow depth measurements, but they're kind of using it as a navigation tool to understand, for example, when they're clearing roads to summer homes early season and clearing those roads, and just understanding where those roads are and where the Snowcat is in relation to those roads. So that's been kind of a parallel use of SnowGage during the springtime. There's also a depth maximum and minimum that we've really established and wanted customers to understand. So maximum depth accuracy that we found is really about 2 meters or 6 feet. So beyond 6 feet, the accuracy begins to drop off at a result, at a rate that we really consider it most accurate up to 6 feet. And there's ways that we set indicators to, so that customers understand when they've kind of reached those levels. But what the feedback that we've had from our customers to date is really that beyond 6 feet, customers are pretty happy with their snow base and coverage. And at that point, they're really less dependent on a snow depth measurement system such as SnowGage. So that's been the primary feedback. Also, we do want to, discuss the minimum measurement as well. So we do have the plus or minus 5 inches minimum. And what we found is, if customers drive it directly over bare ground, they would expect to see some sort of zero indicator. But at this point, if you're driving over pavement, for example, and we've seen the accuracy is not always telling you exactly zero because there's a lot of interference and things bouncing around. At this point, though, we just say when you're driving over bare ground, really the operator should know they're driving on bare ground. And so when you're in that area, we don't want to set the expectation that you're always just going to see zero. So those are the kind of limitations. That said, we've had good customer feedback that it's been extremely useful, and we'll talk about a little bit some of the customer experiences in a little while as well. So let's go ahead, and before we jump into the Office application, I want to play a small video that will just show you a recorded inside of one of the Snowcats, or actually what this was we wanted to kind of show what the actual display looks like inside of the Snowcat. So this Bandicam and this little recorded thing, this is just a little software that allowed me to record on the tablet computer. So that's not going to be present in your actual SnowGage Snowcat. So inside of the this is probably the most prominent screen that's used by operators inside the Snowcat. What you see is a very simple graph that just shows the snow depth. You see the big number over here. So you see the 87 inches for this particular case. You see the colors across the top that shows what the different depths colors represent, the different depths. And so you have this, as the operator is driving along, you see this kind of moving. And if you see a dip, for example, if the snow depth became really low, what you would see is that this chart dips way down and it's just moving as the operator's driving. Now the sensor is taking a reading about every 3 seconds, and that can be adjusted, depending on different needs. But if it were to take a dip down to a really shallow area, you would see this chart start to drop, and then the line would turn red. This is the screen that most operators, as they're grooming, are looking at and monitoring when they go. Now, simply if you touch this map view over here, we'll go ahead and play this little recorded video. So I'm going to stop it here. So over here, units, if you touch this units, you can change it between metric or imperial systems. That's pretty much a one-time setup, depending on your preference. So as you see, what this is we just actually, because it's not winter at the moment, we just put this in a car and started driving around. So you see part of the building there, and we're faking the depths actually. We're putting and so this is the second most used screen within SnowGage. So you have this kind of nice, you just push map right here, and then it'll switch you to the map view. And similar to your smartphone, you can kind of zoom in or pan out using your fingers, just like you would on a smartphone. So as the operator is driving around, and again, this is not showing, this is a good screen as well. So what we have in the system as well, so I mentioned the 6-foot limitation of the system, and we know with snowmaking, there's often the case where you might build up a very large mound, maybe 12-foot deep pile. And if you're on top of that pile and you're pushing it around, you've kind of exceeded that 6-foot limitation. So, one of the feedback that we had and a change that we made to our system is we implemented a maintenance mode. And this is a mode where, maybe the operator is just pushing a whole bunch of snow around at a really high, deep level. And this will allow them to see the actual depth real time, but it won't be recording that GPS data on the position data, and it won't be being sent back to the main offices. So essentially you can push this maintenance mode, and once you achieved your final product, you can just touch exit and it will start recording your data again, and then your map back in the office will reflect the, the time that you were actually exited that maintenance mode and started using it. So what you have in a typical scenario is that you have this GPS is just following the operator around. As for example, here they're driving around and it's just following them. And so let me pause this part here. And so there's different features, for example, that you can have. And there's, if you want to map some hazards, and it will show you, where those are, for example, on the resort. So we're going to exit out of this in just a moment. Almost done with the small video. And this is the last screen, and this is one not typically utilized or viewed by the operators, but it's a way to kind of just see that everything is working well. So again, we had map and graph are the two most used screens, and we have this console view that just kind of shows, you would see this GPS data constantly moving, and this just shows that your GPS is working, and you have a way to also see that your SDS sensor is also working as well. So as you switch to the SDF, it's just showing the different depths, and this is just a way to switch off and see that everything seems to be running fine. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of this little recorded video, and we're going to jump back into the presentation. So as the operator's driving around, they're recording this data just as they work. They're able to see that data. As they jump to the office, what they have is a very basic login. If you've ever used Google Earth, it's very similar. In the navigation, you have a simple report that you can see, for example, on the total hours groomed, the total distance traveled by that snowcat, their average speed, the total area groomed, the average area groomed per hour. And we're going to look at that in the actual system. So in the office, you can look at all of this data. You can determine your grooming priority based on low spots. You can easily share the trail status with resort operations. So for example, snowmaking can look at this and log in and have a look. Anyone that's interested to understand the snow depths of the different parts of the resorts can log in and look at the shared screen. You can also groom these, look at this grooming stats, as we mentioned, by time period. It gives you some basic stats. And related to snowmaking, this has been one of the kind of primary values that's been described to us from our customers. We have some basic calculations based on a study that came from the University of Washington. All of this really just means energy cost, water cost. It's really substantial with snowmaking. Everyone knows that. Anything you can do to kind of minimize and really optimize the use of snowmaking, you can ultimately end up saving a lot of money. So again, it can help determine where and how much snow is actually needed. Okay, let's jump over to the SnowGage Office application. I'm going to exit over this again, and you have this simple login screen. You would just enter your ski resort name and your password. I've already logged into a real ski resort in the United States. This is one that a pretty large resort, prominent resort. This is when you first log in, this is the view that you see. I usually like to increase the size. And what we've done is here you can see, usually during the year, you have the last 24 hours. This is some basic filtering that you have. Usually within the last 24 hours, you would just see all the grooming that happened the night before. So when the when the mountain manager comes in, they can log in, look at it, and see what everything groomed in the last 24 hours. They can look at the most recent. So for example, if you've groomed in different parts of the resort, what SnowGage will allow you to do is see the most recent data from each of the trails that you've defined at your resort. So you may have groomed one trail 2 days ago and the other trails at your resort the night previously. If you push most recent, it's going to take the most recent known data from each of those trails. What we're going to do today, because it's not the middle of the season, is we're going to pick a date. It's a date that I know there was some good data, some good grooming operations. And so here we have March 8th at this resort. So what you see is, based on the different colors, and we're going to go into the various settings and how this was set up to work this way. But this would be a typical login. Down here at the bottom, you see from 0 to 1 foot is red, 1.1 inches to 2 feet is orange, 2 to 3 is yellow, 3 to 4 is green, and so on and so forth. Now, you can just like Google Earth, for example, you can scroll around and just get updated views. Now, this is one view that some customers prefer. We call it a swath. So it's kind of just showing the swath of the snowcat, where it traveled. And each line that you see, that would be one pass of the snowcat. So let's see. So up here, you see there was multiple passes on this trail here, and you see that the depths are about 3 to 4 feet where it's green. There's a couple of low spots. You see this area here in the orange is actually only 1 to 2 feet. So this might be an area that you want to, apply a little attention to. Another view that a lot of customers prefer, and it's actually my favorite view, is if I push this here, I like to see it more in this dot view. And the reason I like that is because when I zoom out, bear with me, it takes a little, we have a lot of data at this resort. You can see the snowcat was pretty busy that night. I like this view because it just kind of the colors start to mold together a little bit to kind of give this sort of heat map type view. You can kind of see in this area, it starts to get a little shallow. All of these orange areas are much shallower. So you can see through this kind of probably fancy neighborhood where they have a lot of access to the ski hills. The trails are a lot, or the trails are a lot shallower in this area. And knowing this resort, we know there to be a lot more snowmaking activities here in these areas over here. And if I zoom out a little farther, we'll kind of see the whole area where this was groomed. So you kind of see, based on this was just the one date. This is March 8th, 2015, and so you can see that there was a lot more snowmaking in this area over here. The trails are a lot shallower. There's a couple of kind of nice additional features. This is just a little message from my go-to meeting display. There's a couple of other nice features that's pretty basic from here, is that you can go and add, simply just add the labels, for example, that will show you where all of the different trails are, for example. It'll take just a moment to update. So we are really looking at a lot of data here. Another thing that a lot of managers like to do, so here you see all of the different trails that exist. That's one that some folks like to have on and off. But if you have a large resort, or if you don't know where those trails are, we do have user-defined geometries that we'll talk about in just a moment that allow you to kind of zoom to the different trails that you've defined in your resort. So those are really easy to add. So we're going to choose, I'm going to double click on one of those, and it's going to just kind of zoom you right to that area. So, when you see, a lot of the resort like the back of your hand, but if you have a large resort, you can kind of just quickly zoom to the different areas just to kind of see the status of the snow in those areas. So, what we found that a lot of customers do is that, this data is visible in both the Snowcat and in the office. You can, print these out so that you could show it to other people, or you can just have them log in directly and look at the data themselves and tell them exactly where they need to go to work. So, this data can be downloaded to a KML file. So if you do prefer to look at it in Google Earth, that is certainly an option. And right now, let's go and talk about the settings of SnowGage. So up here at the top, you have the home screen, which you're looking at now. There's some very basic settings. So you can go and change between metric or imperial. It'll define, for example, this is going to be where your ski resort. This is how we determine where to kind of zoom your map center to automatically. Bear with me for a moment. I need to log back in here because I've kind of. There we go. So we put this on a test server for the sake of presentation because we didn't want to log into the actual resort's data. Okay, and we're back. Okay, so let's go through the settings again. So here we have here's where you can change between imperial and metric systems. And then here's kind of an interesting feature actually. So depending on the type of snow that you're experiencing at your resort, you can change between the sensor can be set up to be a little bit more accurate for the different snow conditions. So there's no need to go out into the snow and manually probe and calibrate the sensor on the actual slope. All you do is in the office, depending on the type of snow that you have, you can just move this bar and the data will be updated and the sensor settings will be automatically updated on the Snowcat. So all you do is if you have packed groom snow, you keep it here at this one. If you're experiencing dry and powder conditions, you can move it to the right. If it's the wettest conditions, you can just move it all the way to the left. And what this does is that there are some variables within that sensor that can be updated to become more accurate depending on your snow conditions. What we found is that most users actually just keep it at this packed groom snow condition because it's kind of the variables that reflect the most common situation, I would say. Here's where you see the one Snowcat. Here's where if you had multiple Snowcats, you would be having a big list of each of the different Snowcats. And so depending on what Snowcat you're mounting and the make and the model, you may have the height may be adjusted, and that's just the height from the sensor to the ground. So that's accounted for in the various makes and models of Snowcats. All right, here's the simple area where you can adjust how your map looks. This is probably the most common setting that we see at the various resorts using SnowGage, is that from about 0 to 1 foot, it's a very red color, and 1 to 2 orange and yellow and green and blue. And so on and so forth. And this is just can be, based on your own preference and the depths that you want to see and care about. You can change it here so that your maps will actually, your data will actually be filtered nicely to look like that on your maps. Okay, so here's kind of an interesting feature is that, at this particular resort, this is where you define, just like in Google Earth, if you've ever drawn a polygon at your resort, you just draw these around the different trails and give them a name. That way you can kind of zoom easily into the various resorts. Here's where also if you had other features, for example, hydrants that you wanted to put on the map so that when the operators are out there, they're driving and they see the different hydrants and where those are located, you can upload those from a Google Earth, for example, if you have those hydrants defined, or you can just draw them directly on the map here if you don't have them defined somewhere else. And again, you have that ability to kind of turn on those different labels so that you can kind of see what the different, where all the different trails are, and use that as a way to kind of draw those features if you're interested in doing that. Lastly, here's the for this particular Snowcat. Looks like it's a piston bully winch cat. You're able to kind of see that in the last 24 hours there was no grooming that happened with this Snowcat. You can look at the most recent grooming features, and this one, again, this is whatever the last time it groomed. This was the last 24-hour period that it groomed. You can also just go similar to what we did before. If we were to go and look at some data from last year, we can see those basic grooming stats. So it groomed for 9 hours, traveled that distance with an average speed. It gives you total acres groomed and average acres groomed per hour. So that's just some basic stats. But really, the primary focus of SnowGage that we've had is really just to make sure that we concentrate on making sure it's accurate and making sure it's easy to use. That was really our chief goals in making this product. So I'm going to go back here to SnowGage and flip back to the presentation. Okay, so bear with me here. Okay, so again, here's the screen that we just looked at. You can use it and see some nice results. You can move around to the different areas and see everything by snow depth, filter data by the date snowcat or ski run. So, as I mentioned, you can look at the different snowcats that you have, and actually, one thing I didn't mention in our review of the desktop application is that, in fact, I'll flip back, is that you can see the last date that snowcat was run. So there would be multiple snowcats running in this particular resort, and you can see the last time that those ran. You can also see the last time that each of these trails were groomed. And so that's a feature that I had forgot to mention in the actual thing. You get a little timestamp that allows them to see when each of these trails were last groomed. You can also look at the various user geometries. You might have a ski run, the hydrants, hazards, or other features that you're interested in. Well, okay, we wanted to talk today also about SnowGage, and how does this compare to alternative systems that you might have seen before, or heard about, or used even. So, again, as kind of a disclaimer, we're not here to, oversell this technology or downplay a competing technology or alternative technology. It's really just to kind of emphasize the difference between the two and let you know what different, how this differs or how it's similar to alternatives that exist. So the technology within SnowGage is an ultra wideband radar technology. That's a technology that we helped develop specifically for this application. That compares to these other two types of alternatives out there is a ground penetrating radar that's been out there for some time, as well as an RTK GPS system that some of you might have heard about out there. So, compared to each of these, here's some kind of basic characteristics of each of these different systems. So installation and setup. So as we mentioned, SnowGage, ours, we consider it to be very easy. A typical installation for the first time is, we've seen, it could be done depending on the installer, but, it takes a couple hours just to make everything, make sure everything's running right and a little bit of testing and everything, but it takes typically about 2 hours. Installation setup for this ground penetrating GPR technology, it is a physically larger sensor, but installation and setup, we've never installed it ourselves, but from what we've heard from a couple of customers is that it's also not that difficult to set up. It's just a larger physical setup. The RTK GPS system, from what we've heard and understand, is the most difficult to set up because it really, based on this technology, this is really a survey grade GPS receiver. It requires getting a very accurate survey of your ski resort in advance, which would happen through, for example, an aerial flyover with LiDAR. There's other ways to do it as well, but based on the initial setup, we understand that to be more difficult than the other two types of systems. Calibration requirements for each of these. So we know with SnowGage, it's really, as you saw, just moving that scale, we've kind of defined the sweet spot for the various snow conditions. And when you move that scale, it just updates the variables within your sensor to kind of accommodate and improve your accuracy a little bit for the various snow conditions. With the ground penetrating radar scenario, from what we understand, there's a frequent kind of on-slope calibration required. So your operator would kind of check the snow depth and calibrate the sensor on a regular basis, just to make sure that sensor is actually continuing to be accurate. With the RTK GPS setup, you kind of had this initial challenge of kind of getting set up, but we don't know there to be any kind of calibration requirement once you're off and running. Snow depth accuracy. All of them seem to have their pros and cons. We consider all of them, excellent tools to kind of understand snow depth and get a good, accurate depth of the snow below the cat. There are some kind of exceptions that we understand for each of them. For ours, certainly we know springtime water, high water content, when the water is just melting off the snow and you're getting small streams developing. We know this not to be an accurate system, and we don't recommend it during those types of conditions. With ground penetrating radar, because of the frequent calibration, if that's not done, there's the risk of that the snow depths can actually be off. We've also, it's been recommended to us that, that how the snow depth is displayed at times can be kind of tricky. So something, if you're going that route, maybe just have a look at the actual way in which that snow depths are displayed, and how the charts, for example, and just make sure you're familiar with how to read those charts. That's really the kind of primary recommendation we've heard. With the RTK technology, this is actually a technology that we really like with GPS and the other part of our business here at Juniper Systems. We know this to be the accuracy to be very excellent, because they will do a very high precision reading of your ski resort, so they'll know the exact elevations, and then they mount the GPS, this really high precision GPS, on top of the Snowcat, and then it's essentially doing a difference between the ground flyover during the summer, for example, and when the depth of your Snowcat, and it's doing kind of an offset to understand what your depth is. We know just here in our primary business that GPS, really requires ideal conditions. So if you have any kind of tree canopy, if there's any kind of obstructions from trees near the area, or kind of maybe more relevant for a lot of ski resorts, if you have a mountain or a canyon, you're in a mountain or a canyon, and it can kind of block the view for a lot of GPS satellites, which certainly can, you really have to make sure your RTK GPS is, adequately has an acquired almanac and sees enough satellites. So we know there to be some challenges just with this type of technology in general. Now, fleet management, this was another topic of area. So simple reports are in SnowGage. So we just have a basic simple reporting. CAN bus integration, so integration with the engine of the Snowcat. With SnowGage, really, if you're wanting to do, the more involved fleet management and integration with the engine, SnowGage is not by itself the system for you. We, again, are focusing primarily on accurate snow depths, ease of use, and just displaying it nicely in a map that you can then make decisions. If you're wanting to integrate with the CAN bus and do, understand other engine diagnostics and things of that nature, SnowGage sensor can be integrated with other fleet management software that's used quite readily in Europe, for example, and we can give you some recommendations if you're interested in this whole area. With the ground penetrating radar, similarly, it's a sensor that depends on the software you're using, but by itself was not something that's integrated with the CAN bus. This other technology with the RTK GPS, because that's made available from one of the Snowcat manufacturers, we believe that to be nicely integrated with the Snowcat engine. So that's kind of their specialty, I would say, because they're the close connection with the Snowcat manufacturer. So related to cost, certainly SnowGage is, from what we understand, is going to be the most affordable. We'll talk about specific pricing in just a moment. The technology one, we know that to be more expensive with ground penetrating radar, and then the other one with RTK GPS, we understand it to be the most expensive. We don't have the exact figures on these, obviously, but just from what we've heard from our customers, we know it to be the most expensive. So purchase options. All right. So really, that's the extent of SnowGage. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to send an email. Please feel free to just write them in the chat on the SnowGage or on the GoToMeeting chat dialogue there. We're happy to answer those, and we'll follow up with each of you individually. I do want to mention that, depending where you are, we may have a ski resort already using the system. And it would be very easy to go and have a look at the system and see how it works, and we're happy to coordinate something like that. So most likely where you are, there's someone regionally close, at least, that could potentially allow you to have a look at the system real time to see how it works. We do have a limited number of demo systems that we would be willing to coordinate a demo to, if you want to try it out, for example, and see how it can work for you. We do have a number of systems that can be used of this nature. So, one thing I didn't mention is that we have been working with SnowGage for probably the last 5 or 6 years and just developing the technology. It's a system that we then started 3 years ago installing it at some of the major ski resorts in our area. So we have 2 years of testing in development in collaboration with some of the largest ski resorts in the United States. So we do have multiple references if anyone would like to talk to an actual ski resort to see how it's working out for them. But kind of as a reference, we do, because we have developed this in collaboration with multiple ski resorts, it is kind of a good reference that the resorts have actually decided to purchase this. It's something that they found useful, and again, we're happy to put you in contact with somebody outside of our organization that can kind of give you an additional reference on the system. So, please, send us an email. Let us know if, your experience with other products. Let us know if you're interested, and we'd be happy to work with you to prepare for this ski season. We hope everybody has a good season and that we get a lot of snow. Please feel free to have a look at our website, www.snowgage.com. And again, thank you very much for your time, and have a good day, and and we wish you the best in preparation for this year's ski season. Thank you very much.